Hi, I'm Elaine Brewster, and this is Aspects of Energy. Welcome and happy Friday. And I am so happy today to have my beautiful oldest daughter with me. And she got her BA in English and taught, but then she got a master's in mental health counseling, and she does that. And so along with my new book that just came out on Tuesday, so people can actually get it on Kindle and this week for 99 cents, or get the real copy. There's a lot of grief and grieving and tears that can occur in a book like that, because you're talking about a hard journey, and all of us have hard journeys of some sort or other. So I would love Sara to talk to us about the idea of self-compassion and grieving, and let's just see where that takes us.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just a little background about me and kind of my journey with what I do. I originally got my bachelor's in English, as my mom said, and I started working with at-risk youth at an alternative high school, and just became really passionate about working with youth that tended to be underprivileged and at risk for all kinds of things, including dropout. And so I just kind of fell in love with youth that struggle. And after I did that for a while, I did some residential treatment programs and things, is when I decided I really enjoyed the relationship aspect of things. I loved teaching, but I found that it was really hard to reach individual kids because you're trying to, fit a specific curriculum into a certain amount of time, and you've got, 35 kids that you're trying to reach, and it was often the younger. Not the younger, it was often the kids that were that would tend to struggle that I really had my attention on. And so I decided to go back and get my degree in clinical mental health counseling, and became a therapist, and worked in community mental health for a while. And now I work with juvenile justice, and so still working with youth. I've also worked with adults and children. And one of the things that I would say that the prominent theme that comes up the most in therapy is grief. Grief is not just about losing a loved one to death. There's all kinds of things that die. And it could be a relationship, and that relationship could have a death through divorce. It could have a death through just going separate ways, a breakup. Other types of grieving and losses can happen with the loss of hope, the loss of something desired. It could be the loss of a job. It could come through the loss of losing a home and losing an area that you live in. With that, and with both of those things, a lot of times there's a loss of kind of like a life that was envisioned, a loss of dreams, a loss of things that you kind of envisioned for yourself, in the future. And another one that comes up a lot of times, not just the future, but the past. Working with youth and adults, I've worked with a lot of childhood trauma, or trauma that's happened in early young adult years. And what often happens for individuals is that they have a loss of innocence, a loss of developmental periods, a loss of childhood, a loss of, just the opportunity to just kind of grow up gradually. And so these are the common themes that when I'm working with anyone, these are kind of the common themes that come up. And so even though, when we think about mental health, we think about depression, we think about anxiety, we think about severe mental health challenges. A lot of times what it comes back to is some kind of loss that somebody has suffered. And one of the things that I've this is kind of my perspective. This is not scientific or anything like that, because we talk a lot about healing. And one of the things that I've kind of discovered is that grief never completely heals. It leaves holes. When we lose something that's important to us, it leaves a mark or a wound or a hole. And even though we do healing, the healing seems to be more about not filling the hole, but finding ways to make peace with what has happened. Finding ways to make peace with the hole or the wound or whatever it is. And so a lot of the work that I've done with adults, young adults, adolescents, has been finding where those wounds are and giving it a lot of validation so that they can kind of move on and learn how to make peace with what has happened and make peace with that wound. Do you have any thoughts or any questions or anything at this point that have come up for you?
Not to interrupt you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the journey for me, and I'll give you a little personal background as well. Some of the griefs that I've experienced in my lifetime was being sexually abused as a child. About 5 or 6 years old, some things happened that affected me up until about the time that I was in my 20s. And there was some losses of childhood and things like that that I couldn't get back. Losing my dad, of course, has been probably one of the most, probably the biggest thing that I've grieved throughout my life. And then about 9 years ago, I was divorced after being married for 13 years. And that was a loss of a marriage, a relationship, and another family, my ex-husband's family, things like that. So there was loss there as well. And so I feel like grief is something that I'm familiar with. It's something that I've experienced with, and so some of what I'm talking about is not just the work that I've done with clients. I would say probably the majority is the work that I've done in my own therapy sessions and with myself, is learning to make peace with those wounds that are there. So one of the things that's very common with grief work is what we call the stages of grief, which is now known as the cycle of grief. There's the 5 stages of grief, but now they talk about it being a cycle of grief because they've found that grief is not like da, 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 these nice stepping stones and then, oh, we've reached the end and ta-da, we're done. It really does cycle, and even more than that, it sometimes bounces in between those phases or stages. And so it starts with denial. That's kind of that shock, that first shock, this can't have happened. Then it moves into some kind of anger, and often with the anger, there's a bargaining phase. sometimes we think about a bargaining phase as kind of like bargaining with God, hey, don't let this happen, or if you will only, um, change the course of this action, then I will be on my best behavior for the rest of my life. Just don't let this thing happen. And then it moves on, or I should say it moves down into a type of depression.
Mm.
And then through depression, we tend to eventually get to a place of acceptance. And that place of acceptance, that for me has been kind of the goal through the grief work that I've done myself, because when I can accept reality and I can accept the way things are, doesn't mean I have to like it, doesn't mean I approve of it. It just means that I'm acknowledging that this is the reality. That opens up space for me to just continue on and keep being me and keep letting life go the way it's been going. And so we come back to acceptance again and again. We come back to acceptance, and why kind of understanding the grief cycle is important is because one of the things that I've noticed in my personal life, and this is why I call them holes or wounds, is that things happen in life that remind us of what we've lost.
And then it feels like it happened all over again.
It can. Yeah. Yeah. I'll give you a few examples. One example is when Christmas comes around. And Christmas to me growing up was full of traditions, and it was all about my dad. My dad procrastinating in the morning. He'd come down first and he'd light the candles and turn on the music and get these little oil lamps going and get a fire going. And we're all on the stairs waiting for about 30 minutes. And so it's of course a tradition I've carried over with my kids, and and then my mom was busy getting some breakfast ready and things like that. But Christmas to me was very traditional. I had a mom, I had a dad, and I had my family always together every Christmas. Well, since being divorced, my Christmases look different. It's just me. It's just me staying up at night, trying to put together electric razor scooters that I don't know what that looks like. And it's just me pretending to eat the cookies. And in the morning, it's just me, and it takes the magic out of some of it. And some of those years, my kids are with their dad. And so it's just me hanging out, I've spent Christmases all by myself. And they're peaceful and they're fine. And I come to that acceptance again, but it is very different, and it can be very painful as I work toward that existence again. So that's an example of a wound that I have to turn towards acceptance again. Another one is the grief of losing my dad. And having him gone almost 20 years now, he met my oldest son, who is almost 20, and knew him for almost a year, but my other two children don't know my father. He's missed out on events, important family events. He's missed out on important school events. When I've had some financial struggles, or I've had car troubles, these kinds of things that I used to go to him about, that opportunity is not there anymore. And when that opportunity is not there, it reminds me, it's a reminder that I've lost someone very important to me, and a role that was very important to me. And so this is why I feel like understanding the grieving cycle and coming back to acceptance again and again is so important, is because it's not a one-time fix-all. In fact, that's not what we're doing with grief. We're not trying to fix anything. It really is an acknowledgement and a warm embrace. It really is turning back to acceptance. So I feel like my mom asked me about, or she mentioned compassion, self-compassion, compassion-focused therapy. I have several types of therapy that I do, but I would say that compassion-focused therapy and self-compassion are is my main type of therapy. It's the one that I found has helped me the most in my own personal journey. And it's something that I have seen be really beneficial to a lot of people, not just my clients, but just people in general. And the reason why it's so powerful is grief can sometimes turn into a type of shame, or shame can be associated with grief. And what I mean by that, shame is kind of this idea that something is wrong. And usually it's targeted ourselves. Something's wrong with me. I should have done something differently. We start shitting on ourselves. We start, or I've heard of the tyranny of the shoulds. We start kind of, things are not the way that they should be. So we can have some shame. We can also have feelings of blame. And sometimes blame is justified, but a lot of times we're just looking to displace our own discomfort with our grief when we blame. And so shame, blame is typically pushed outward. Shame is often pushed inward. We're pointing the finger at ourselves. But shame is this idea that we feel like this hole that we have inside of us, or this wound, this thing that we lost, this person that we lost, something's wrong. If only, and that's, I think, sometimes where that bargaining chip comes in. And it's not so much, God, if you do this, it's more like, if I had only done this differently, this would have happened. I hear this a lot in relationships. When relationships end is when people internalize that and carry shame with that. It's usually they're really internalizing that they did something wrong, which may or may
all do something wrong. We're not perfect people.
True. But shame is different than doing something wrong. Shame is typically, I am something wrong. There's something wrong with me. Mm-hmm. At the core. Core. Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah.
That's hard to get rid of, I would think.
It is hard to get rid of. And, and especially with grief, which is so, most of the things with grief, we grieve them because we've lost them and we can't change them. A lot of times they're associated with something unchangeable. And there's something in our brain sometimes that thinks that if we point the finger at ourselves and we're the thing that was wrong in that equation, that we can somehow escape ever having that happen again, or that we somehow deserve, what has happened. And I think in some ways, shame can be a natural part of the cycle. But let me rephrase that. Not that shame is the part of the cycle, but the bargaining part. The bargaining that kind of comes with shame. If only this hadn't have happened, if only I had done something differently, then that is the part, like that's the part that's a natural part of the cycle. But when we get stuck in that, it can really, we can really get stuck in depression and in a very critical voice. And so grief is really asking to be held in a safe place without that sense of shame, without that sense of blame. And that's where self-compassion comes in. Compassion focused therapy is a specific type of therapy that it was developed by a man in England, and he originally came up, kind of brought this therapy together because it was really powerful for shame. He was noticing that there was a lot of people, a lot of us have a critical voice. We're either kind of trained that way by our parents, we're trained that way by society. We're sometimes trained to, in fact, the research shows that the reason people have the reason that people have the hardest time applying self-compassion is that they're worried if they're not hard on themselves, they won't meet goals, they'll slide back into bad habits. This is a belief that we have in our society, is that we need to be hard on ourselves in order to be good people, to progress, to grow, to not do dumb things or slide back into bad habits.
A really bad visual for that is the old way that they taught Irish dance. The youngest daughter is an Irish dancer, and luckily she never had this. But the old way of teaching Irish dance, just imagine river dance and imagine those legs, just really, really lifting up high. And they would take switches and to their students, and they would just switch their legs to make them go higher. And so, yeah, they got higher, but
yeah, that's a really good,
it's a bad visual.
yeah. It's a really kind of shows how we do. So imagine that we're doing that to ourselves, not with a switch, but with thoughts and with words, and it becomes very conditioned inside of us to treat ourselves. And so compassion focused therapy is another approach. It's a way of treating ourselves like we're our own best friend, or the way we would treat a best friend, a good friend that was going through something similar. And we can do that in all kinds of situations. It doesn't just have to be shame. It could be anything. But self-compassion can be a really valuable tool to not change grief, not make grief go away, but to be a salve or a healing, a balm, a soothing balm that comforts us when we need it. If you think about when a child is sick and we give them chicken noodle soup and we kind of sit by their bedside to kind of be there for them, we know that the chicken noodle soup is not going to automatically take all the germs away, take the cold away.
Yes, it is.
Take the temperature away. We do it because it helps to make them feel better. And so self-compassion is chicken noodle soup. It is a way of giving ourselves what we need, treating ourselves with compassion when we need it. Sometimes there's some confusion about self-compassion versus like self-esteem and self-worth. And that's one of the beautiful things about self-compassion is self-esteem and self-worth are sometimes based on how we believe or feel about ourselves. Do we esteem ourselves of worth? Do we Do we believe that we're a certain way? And that can get us, self-esteem especially can get us caught up into some comparison things sometimes. Self-compassion is just the action of treating ourselves with care. Doesn't matter if we think we're the greatest thing or not. Doesn't even matter if we like ourselves. We can still treat ourselves with kindness and with love. And so there's an interesting phrase, to go back to the chicken noodle soup analogy. There's an interesting phrase that says, we give ourselves compassion not to feel better, but because we feel bad. We give ourselves compassion or kindness not to make ourselves feel better, but because we feel bad. And this is a paradox, because most of the time when we think about feeling grief or we think about feeling sadness, a lot of times we want to feel better. I mean, most of the times I just want to feel better. And so we do lots of things to try and help make ourselves feel better. And I'm not saying these things are wrong or anything like that. I'm just kind of saying what we generally do. And so, positive thinking, or we do some distractions. There's all kinds of things that can help us to make us feel better. But the unfortunate side effect that sometimes happens when we do that is we're neglecting the hurt. We're neglecting the wound, and we're kind of pushing it down. We haven't given it enough space. We haven't let it know. We haven't kind of like put our warm embrace around it and, hey, I see you, I feel you. We're just focused on feeling better. And what happens when we focus on feeling better is we subconsciously communicate to ourselves that there was something wrong with the way we were feeling. Oh, that grief was bad, or there was something wrong with feeling sad or depressed. And so now we're back again to kind of that idea of shame, where there's this sense of wrongness that comes with grief. And so, so the paradox really comes through with when we give ourselves compassion, we're doing it just because we feel bad. Just like the child with the chicken noodle soup, they feel bad. We're not trying to fix anything. We're not trying to get them better. We are trying to comfort them. And the weird paradox that usually happens with this is that naturally we do feel better when we approach ourselves in a way of kindness and compassion, and we just, hey, man, that hurts. I'm just going to hold you for a second. The natural repercussion typically is that we end up feeling better. But if we try to force ourselves to feel better, it's creating some resistance there, and it's kind of communicating, hey, something's bad, something's wrong. So compassion, self-compassion in a nutshell is there's three components, kind of three steps to this. The first one is just acknowledging the pain. We sometimes in therapy call this mindfulness, naming the emotion, naming where the emotion is. It's kind of an identification. Man, this hurts. This is hard. This is really painful for me right now.
Well, yesterday, I think my youngest daughter, who was 17 when her dad died, she finished reading the book, and she was just crying and crying. And she said to me later, she said, I came to accept, that Dad was gone. But now for a week and a half while I've been reading the book, he's been alive again. And now I lost him all over. And it was, she'll be okay. She was okay, and she'll be okay now. It was just really sad. And her husband, well, it was so sweet. Her little 2-year-old kept coming in and just patting her back. It was so cute. But her husband was trying to make everything better. He was trying to fix it, Why can't you talk to me about it? Well, she couldn't talk because like Sarah said, identifying the emotion, it was all up here and she couldn't talk. And, and when she could talk, finally, she just said, I don't want you to fix anything. I just want you to acknowledge that I feel sad right at this moment.
Yeah.
Okay, now no one else wants to read my book. Okay, sorry. Disclaimer. Okay, go on.
So the first step in self-compassion really is just identifying what we're feeling and even where we're feeling. It can be really profound. What we want to do a lot of times is we want to get in our head and start spinning around and trying to analyze things. And we sit there and we try and figure out, what went wrong? Why am I feeling this way? How can I stop feeling this way? We're just up here. And meanwhile, the feeling is somewhere in our body and we're kind of neglecting it because we're spinning and spinning up here. And so it really helps to just kind of, and I do this with my clients sometimes. I'll have them envision a light up in their forehead, and then I'll have them envision just kind of slowly where that light drops down into their body so that they can find that, localize where the pain is, and sometimes it's right in the middle of the chest. Sometimes it's right over in the heart space. Sometimes it's down in the stomach. It could be lots of places, but just to help bring our awareness, not just to the story behind the pain, but to the pain or the emotion, the feeling itself. That can be a really powerful part. And so that's that first step of self-compassion, is just a recognition of, this is what's going on. This is what I'm experiencing right now. The second component to self-compassion is remembering that pain is a universal feeling and that we are part of a common humanity. Sometimes what happens when we are in our most painful moments, we isolate, often feel isolated as well. We sometimes feel like we're the only one that has felt this way. So I have a couple of stories to share with that. And I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. Get your Kleenex out.
I will.
One of the things, the night that my dad passed away, my husband, now ex-husband, had left to go out of town. We were getting ready to move to California, and either the day before or earlier that day, he had taken the moving truck and he had driven, so he wasn't here. And most of my siblings were here. My one brother that lived here, well, I would say about half of my siblings were here actually. My one brother that was married at the time, they came up, and anyway, it was after he had passed and everybody, my mom had gone to sleep or done whatever she did. My sister had gone to sleep. My brother and his wife went back to their home. I put my little 10-month-old, 11-month-old to bed, and I was so alone. My husband wasn't here. And I went out to my car and I closed all the windows and I screamed and I screamed. And there's another story that correlates with that from a book that I read years and years ago called The Poisonwood, or just Poisonwood Bible, by Barbara Kingsolver. It's about some Christian missionaries that I believe go into Africa and some of the experiences that they have. And one of the stories that they relate is one of the African women loses a child. I don't remember if it was sickness, how the death came about. But at night, the woman started to cry and howl, and just like I was doing privately in my car where nobody could hear. I mean, I'd kept myself together that whole evening. And then I was able to go grieve. She was grieving in her tent. And one by one, all of the women in the village picked up that that lament, and together they all cried for this one woman who had lost her child. And when I think of this idea of common humanity and universal pain, those two stories come back to me, because the women in the book had it right. And now, even though I don't live in an African village, and our culture is very, very different here. But I can mentally and emotionally, when I'm grieving something, I can remember that I'm not alone. I can remember that there's energies, and that there's stories in the world of women and men and children, people that have felt that same pain that I'm feeling. And that's really helpful for me, because when we don't feel alone, again, it reemphasizes, oh, this makes sense. This pain that I identified actually makes sense, and it's kind of like part of being human. So that's the second component of self-compassion. The third and last component is to apply kindness. Be kind to yourself. Kind of the story that my mom was sharing about my younger sister and how her 2-year-old son was kind of patting her on the back. That is what she needed right then. Well, I can't speak for her, but that is, that was his interpretation of what she needed right then. And, and if you think about how you would treat a good friend when they are struggling, oftentimes the things that, that we would ask is, hey, what can I do for you? What do you need right now? What can I do for you? And we can do that same thing instead of going to that critical place or that place of denial and trying to shut it out. Once we've identified and reminded ourselves that our feeling makes sense, we can actually look inward and kind of just find our wisest part of ourselves and just say, hey, what do I need right now? Do I need a nap? Do I need to cry? Do I need to watch something funny to just kind of like change up the emotion that I'm feeling right now? Do I need to talk to a friend? Do I need to go write some things down? Do I need to just sit and just kind of feel what this feels like right now? And this self-compassion, these steps of self-compassion, they are a big part of what can bring us to that acceptance phase in the grief cycle, because we're identifying and just kind of allowing something to be there, and then we're giving ourselves like this warmth and kindness that that can help be that soothing balm. So that's kind of what I have.
Wow. Comments, thoughts, if you have something you're thinking. I think Sandra does. You'd have to unmute yourself. I'm looking for a quote here.
I have a real comment. Wow. A double wow.
Yeah.
And it really will liberate us to know that we're not alone. Nothing is so hard that it's going to do us in unless we let it do us in. So those 3 steps that you identified are so good, and I'm so glad that you reviewed them, because when you did, you gave us more examples of what it looks like. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the comment.
Something that she just said reminded me, Gordon B. Hinckley said, "In all of living, have much fun and laughter. Life is to be enjoyed, not just endured."
Ooh.
So, so like she said, sometimes I love that. Some of you, I bet, came from the same kind of upbringing I had, where your parents were teaching excellence, and you got good grades, and that was really meaningful, and life was busy, and people were always doing things, and it drives my kids crazy because I'm always busy and doing things. But but it's okay to just sit sometimes, and it's okay to like you said, to just enjoy and not just endure. One time, I think it's when all 6 of my kids were here, and and in those days I was sewing everything for them, and and taking people places, and just really, really busy. And one time in the middle of the day, the Spirit of the Lord came to me and said, "Go lie down for 20 minutes." And I just went, "What? You're telling me to not work? What?" And I see, and that was where the Spirit was caring more about me than I was about me, because I didn't know to be able to stop if I needed to. And somebody else up there cared about me and said, "Enough." And that was a really interesting experience, because I wasn't expecting that.
We have a couple comments.
Oh,
here,
we do.
Kat and Hattie Jane.
Okay, Kat, go for it.
Hi, everyone. I want to say I was invited by Sandra, and thank you so much, Sandra, for inviting me.
Thanks.
And I just loved it. And I wish I would have written things down when they popped out at me when you said them, because now I would have read them back to you. And is there any way I could listen to that again?
Yes, it will be on YouTube, Kat.
Oh, okay.
So for us, we're in Utah. So it's 2:41 right now. So somewhere around 3:00. So Eastern time, around 5:00, it'll be put on YouTube. You can find it under, look under my name, Elaine Brewster, and look for today's date and the title, Aspects of Energy. And if you look at those 3 things, it should come up.
Write that down.
And if
I'll write that down. Aspects of energy.
right, and if Sandra's got your email, I can always email it to you guys, and then you can email
Okay.
Sandra.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yes,
you.
it was wonderful. There were at least 4 or 5 things that I really just will value so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Hattie Jane, what are you thinking?
That many people never fully grieve, especially people who care.
Talk a little louder, Hattie Jane.
Many people perhaps have never fully grieved, and especially in the caring profession or the caring territory.
Wait, she's a nurse.
Okay. I agree with you. I think, yeah, because you just kind of have to keep going on. You kind of just pick up. I've worked with some nurses, and I've seen that where there's not an opportunity, built in, like a special built-in opportunity to grieve. You just keep on caring. And so
Well, mothers and wives
yeah.
and people who are functional
Mhm.
oftentimes are busy functioning,
Yeah.
and the grief gets a bit buried, and then functioning keeps going, and you never really complete the grieving.
Yeah.
And many times that comes out in other ways, and you don't recognize it because grieving is not part of our society.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that oftentimes there's a tendency to rush through and just get back to life and those positive emotions that we want to be feeling. And you're right, it ends up taking away from the full scope of that grieving process. So.
Well, and then I guess we don't know when it's going to come, when it's going to be complete. I remember my dad died. He was 89 and he died in June. And I was really sad to have him gone, but he had secondhand emphysema and macular degeneration. So now he's gone. He can breathe again. He can see again. That's good. But but all of a sudden, 2 months later, in August, I was just driving along, and I was looking at Mount Timpanogos, this big mountain that was in the road ahead of me. And all of a sudden, I just burst into tears. For some reason, the mountain just reminded me of him in some way. And I kind of had to pull off to the side of the road. And it was nice just to sit and cry for him and remember him.
I think Dawn Marie had her hand up. at
Oh,
one
Dawn
point.
Marie.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you so much for having your guests. They're always so enlightening and so right on time.
And this guest is my daughter, Dawn Marie.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, nice to meet you. You have such a jewel of a mother.
Oh,
So blessed. Yes.
thanks, Dawn Marie.
In just the short amount of time that I've known her, she is a light that draws you in to receive the confirmation of things that you may be struggling with. So thank you both.
Thank
But
you.
my question to you was, as I listened to you, I was thinking, at what point do you get over the death, the divorce, the loss of family relationships? And you confirmed it today by saying acceptance and compassion, and knowing that your thoughts are what kind of keep you stuck in the situation. But today, I really do feel like I've been doing the work, and it's been very clear now that what I'm needing to do is thoroughly come to an acceptance of all of those areas that have been kind of lingering in my mind. I've been doing the work, but it's like whenever there's an opportunity to hear a talk of something like this, it kind of brings it back up. And I want to put it in a place where it happened, and I know that it happened, and I'm okay that it happened, and just leave it there and move on. So thank you today for your message. It was very confirming. And again, I needed it. So thank you, Elaine, for your guest and being confirming each time.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
Well, thank you all so much. Sarah has given us tons and tons to think about. Yes, hearts and love to all of you too. And let's work on accepting ourselves better. That's something that we could all think about, work on the rest of today and for this week, and see how we all do. We'll come back next week and and have a report. Thank you so much. We'll see you later.
We just know we'll do better because we've had today.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I ordered my book on day one of its release. I got it from Amazon.
Oh,
I'm excited. I'm excited, y'all. We got a well.
Ben Woodward was so cute. He says, I'm going to keep this in my car until I see you so you can sign it.
Yes. Absolutely. Have a great day, ladies. Be safe out there.
Have a great day.
Safe.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Good to
Bye
see
now.
you, Steve. Yes.
You're an awesome mother and daughter.
Amen.